Alright, so this is going to be a guide to mech loadout configuration. First thing I like to do when I'm configuring a new mech is actually just strip it down so there's nothing on it, engine included. And this is actually going to make it easier later to create a configuration that actually works. I'm actually going to strip down the endosteel and the ferrofibrous just because I'll explain to you guys what those do. So I've also got a double heatsink structure. I'm just going to strip all this down as well as Artemis. Alright, so let's actually just get started with the different sections of loadout that you can add to your mech. So weapons, obviously, ammo, equipment, armor distribution, and structure upgrades. Structure and armor upgrades. So what we've got here under armor is we've got standard armor and ferrofibrous armor. Basically, the ferrofibrous armor is a little bit lighter and a little bit more protective. But what it uses is it uses up some of your slots. So on a mech, you've got a certain number of empty slots when you've stripped everything down. And these are slots where you can place other items, for example, weapon systems. All right? Some slots, or some of these are default built in. You can't remove them. They're just part of the mech. But everywhere else is going to be empty slots. You've got legs, torso, center torso, head sometimes has an empty slot. So when you're configuring your mech, using up slots with, for example, an armor upgrade, and as you can see if I put this armor upgrade, and then I take a look, some of my slots will be used up by that armor upgrade. So I can no longer place weapons in those slots. Now, I can actually place weapons or equipment here still, and what will happen is the armor will bump over into either the left or right torso. So it'll just kind of keep going down on the left or right torso. So you can actually decide where you want to put your equipment, extra equipment, even if you have an armor upgrade. But we'll get back to armor in a minute. Because the first thing that I actually like to do when I'm designing my mech is decide on its weapon systems. I'm going to actually take you guys through the most organic, like kind of fluid way to set up your mech so that you don't have to take components off as much and then mix them around as much, because if you do things in a reverse order, you'll find yourself over tonnage and then you're stripping down, and then or you find yourself with or without enough slots and you're stripping down components to try to make everything work. But if you start with your weapons, you can kind of make everything work a lot more fluidly, so it'll kind of work better from the first time. You'll be able to add what weapon systems you want, and you'll be able to see if you meet the amount of tonnage, and then if you don't, then you can decide on maybe a lighter engine or something like that. So I always start with the weapons and I end with the engine, and that's actually, I think, the easiest way to set up a mech. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add three PPCs to this mech, which is a 50-ton hunchback. It's got a fair bit of configuration space on 50 tons, but not a lot. Actually, 3 is going to be too many, but I'm just going to do that so that you guys can see how to tweak things around and make a setup, work for you. So I'm starting out with 3 PPCs. Now, the nice thing about PPCs is that they are a very long-range weapon, and they deliver a lot of single, very specific damage to a very specific spot on a mech. So unlike, for example, lasers, which actually have a duration. When you fire a laser, it has I don't know, like a second duration or 2-second duration. It's a short duration that you actually have to hold the weapon aim directly on target, and if you take the weapon's aim off target, it'll start to do damage to a different section of the mech, or if you take the weapon entirely off the mech, you only get part of the damage that a laser would have done. So the nice thing about PVCs is that you don't have to hold the aim down. You can aim for your target, fire your weapon, and what they hit, they do full damage to. So it's really great at picking out specific sections of a mech and doing the maximum amount of damage to that section of a mech. The other nice thing about PPC is, like I say, is they have a very nice long range. You can snipe quite well from PPCs. You've also got the ER PPCs, which have an even more extended range. The only downside about the ER PPCs is they generate additional heat. So ER PPCs generate 15 heat. Regular PPCs generate only 10 heat. They do the same amount of damage, and they have all the other same stats. But the ER PPC generates 50% more heat, which is considerable. I find that in combat, practically speaking, the PPC has got long enough range for me, so I don't want to deal with all that extra heat. So I don't usually, I usually kind of stay away from the ER PPC. ER large laser, same principle as a large laser, same damage and stats and all that. It just generates more heat. Large pulse laser. I actually haven't really used this much because I don't like the stats on it. Basically, what I don't like is the range on the large laser. When I put on a large laser, it's because I want to have a ranged weapon, and that's actually an important thing when you're deciding about the configuration of your mech. What's your playstyle? Like, a lot of what goes on in a mech battle is up close, and a lot of what goes on is at long range. So if you have weapons that are only up close, then you're going to be kind of twiddling your thumbs and waiting around while the battle is going on at long range, because your lance and your team and their team are going to be engaging at these long ranges, and unless you want to run up to the enemy, which is usually death, if you stick your nose out and make a solo approach, you're basically going to get yourself blown up really fast, because you've got their whole team just sort of waiting for somebody to poke their nose out. And if you're the one who does that to try to go in and engage at a close range while your whole team is engaging at a long range, then yeah, you're just going to get yourself blown up essentially for the most part. So when configuring your mech, it's kind of important to have a long-range offensive as well as a medium-range offensive. I've actually been getting into some close-range configurations lately, but to start, I think it's a good idea to have a long and a medium offensive. You can just do long, and you can just snipe, but what the weapons platforms on a mech kind of follow suit to is that long-range weapons aren't as powerful at medium range as medium-range weapons, and medium-range weapons aren't as powerful as short-range weapons at short range. So the shorter the range on a weapon, the less heat it tends to generate, and the more damage per second it can output. So if you're really up close and you have the smallest weapon, you'll have an advantage over the mechs which have a heavy weapon platform and no short range weapons. Let me give you an example of that. For example, pound for pound, we're talking pound for pound, heat tonnage for tonnage. If you take a look at the large laser, its damage is 9, its heat is 7, and its cooldown is 3.25. All right, so if you take a look at the medium laser, its damage is 5, its heat is 4, and its cooldown is 3. Now, one of the main differences between the large laser and the medium laser is the tonnage. So the large laser takes up 5 tons. All right, and a medium laser takes up only 1 ton. Large laser also takes up 2 slots. Medium laser only takes up 1 slot. So if you take the tonnage into consideration here, and you put 5 medium lasers in place of the 1 large laser, 5 tons worth of medium laser versus 5 tons versus of large laser, obviously you're going to have a lot more firepower. You're going to have 25 points of damage versus 9 points of damage. Obviously, you can't always just add 5 lasers because of the hardpoint restrictions, but you can still consider the heat equation. The medium laser is still better when you consider the heat equation. So basically, if you add 2 medium lasers, the damage is going to be 1 point more than the large laser, and the heat is only going to be 1 point more, and the cooldown is a tiny bit faster. Okay, so basically what you're looking at with 2 medium lasers is the roughly equivalent damage output to a large laser, and you're only using 2 tons instead of 5, right? So it only takes 2 medium lasers to equal 1 large laser, and it only takes 2 tons instead of 5 tons. So you get way more damage if you have the slots. That's the only question. That's the only part of the equation here, which factors in large and medium weapons for maximum damage output. Is, do you have enough hard points to mount those additional energy weapons on? So that's kind of the formula, and the same thing obviously applies to like the autocannons. I don't have a ballistic slot on this mech actually, but the autocannons kind of follow suit to the same formula as the lasers. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the autocannons, because the autocannons are nice. Actually, I'll just switch over to a different. You know what? We'll get back to autocannons. We'll continue our configuration tutorial here. So I've loaded some PPCs, regular PPCs. You know what? I haven't actually explored the pulse laser that much yet, just because I find that the range really makes it suffer a lot. They're basically about half the range as a regular laser, and as far as the statistics go, they don't really appear to be a whole lot more damaging. I'm not sure if their firing pattern makes them a little bit more damaging, but I don't think it does. I'll have to experiment with that a little bit more. Missile systems. You got your basic long-range missile systems. What these do is they'll lock onto a target, and as long as you maintain your lock, they will seek your target. These are good because they can actually fly over obstacles. If you're behind a trench, behind a rock, they'll actually shoot upward and over and around this obstacle, and they'll come down on your enemy. So if you don't see your enemy, you can still shoot your enemy, and this is useful for if you have like spotter mechs out there to keep a target lock. The only downside is that if the spotter mechs or the target, if you don't actually have a sight on the target, you're kind of at the mercy of whether or not the mech appears on your radar in order to be able to maintain that missile lock. But basically LRMs do damage in proportion to the number of missiles that they fire. So if you have an LRM-10, it fires off 10 missiles, and each missile does 1.1 damage. So that equals 11 damage. LRM-5 is obviously 5 times 1.1. And it's a similar principle as with the laser systems. The bigger LRM does less damage ton for ton than, for example, 5 LRM5s. Four LRM5s. 4 LRM5s would do the same damage as an LRM20, except 4 LRM5s would only take up 4 tons, whereas the LRM20 takes up 20 tons. Now the LRM5 actually takes up less slots as well than one LRM20. Like 4 LRM5 takes up less slots than one LRM20, but you have to have enough hard points to mount it on, so that's kind of the trade-off that you always have to kind of be balancing around and figuring out, like, does the mech have enough hard points? The SRM is a short-range missile. It's a dumbfire missile. It does roughly twice as much damage, actually a little bit more, than roughly twice as much damage as the LRM, but it doesn't have any lock-on capability, with the exception of the Streak SRM, which does have some lock-on capability. So yeah, the Streak, the short-range missiles can be very damaging. The downside to the short-range missile is that you can't hit a specific section of a mech. What I've often found is that in mech combat, the difference between successful combat and unsuccessful combat is aiming your weapons very specifically. If you aim your weapons very specifically and you only ever hit the center torso, instead of wasting shots on the left torso, left arm, right arm, whatever, if you only ever hit the center torso, then you only have to go through the center torso's armor to destroy your enemy. If your shots are a little bit wide, they hit the arms, they hit the center or left or right torso, then you have to go through twice and almost 3 times as much armor to actually destroy your enemy. So the more specific you can be with your shots, the faster you can kill your enemy, and SRMs don't provide any specific damage. They kind of spread out and they hit everywhere on the mech. That being said, if you load on enough of them, they can still certainly do a lot of damage. The other neat thing with weapons platforms is that each type of weapon will cause your enemy's cockpit to shake. I'm not going to talk too much about strategy right now, but if your enemy's cockpit is shaking, if they're being pounded by missiles and their explosions are everywhere, then they're going to have a really hard time aiming back and targeting you. So until your weapons stop hitting them and they can see again and they can see where to aim. So if you're using weapons like, for example, it's not in the selection list here, but like an autocannon 10, that causes quite a bit of torso shake when it hits. It causes the mech torso to twist and shake and for your opponent's targeting to be kind of thrown off a little bit, and that makes it really hard for them to target you back at the same time as they're being shot. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about when you're choosing weapons. I'm not sure which ones cause more or less torso shake, but that would actually be an interesting video to make, and I may make something like that later. So the NARC, I actually have not used this, but basically, just by description, a fire projectile that accelerates missile lock. So basically, when you fire this at your enemy and it kind of attaches to your enemy, it'll make further missiles easier to lock on. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. That's kind of how I remember it working back from previous games of Mechwarrior. But like I said, I haven't actually used it in this Mechwarrior Online yet, so I might be wrong. I haven't used tag either, so I'm only going to talk about stuff that I know. Alright, so anyway, I've loaded on 3 PPCs. Because I got 3 energy slots here. PPC is an energy weapon, it does not require any ammo. And that's actually one of the nice things about energy weapons, is that where you see the tonnage on a PPC, for example, as being 7 tons, and you might see, an autocannon with 5 tons, it's like an autocannon 5 with 5 tons or whatever. Yeah, also have to remember that that the autocannon needs ammo, and each container of ammo weighs a ton. So if you want to pack on enough ammo to last for a whole fight, you need at least, well, you need probably 2 to 3 containers per projectile weapon that you have on your mech. So basically you have to figure an extra 2 or 3 tons of ammo for each projectile weapon that you have. Now the nice thing about projectile weapons is that they don't generate as much heat as energy weapons, and they don't require as many heat sinks to operate. Now that's the downside to energy weapons, is you can load on a lot of energy weapons. They don't require ammo, but they do require heat dissipation. If you don't have enough heat efficiency, you're going to overheat your mech, and you're going to shut down or blow up. Now, like I said, the standard heatsink takes up 1 slot, and you can also upgrade to a double heatsink, which only weighs, I'm going to get to that later, but basically, energy weapons also require a form of ammo, which is called heatsinks. You know, it doesn't actually use ammo, but it does require slots, and it does take up tonnage to use on your mech. So basically, by default, your mech will have standard heatsinks installed, usually. From this section, actually, you can choose to add heatsinks. You can choose to add your engine. We're not going to actually do that yet, but I'm actually going to talk about it a little bit. Actually, you know what? We can actually get onto the engines now. The engine is probably the next upgrade to think about here, because well, come to think of it, actually, since we're creating an energy mech, what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to look for good heat efficiency. All right, so we'll get back to engines in just a minute. Now, since I've only loaded up 3 weapons onto this mech, and they take up that much space, I still have all of that space, and all of that space, and all of that space. I basically have a lot of free space. So what I want to be able to do here is load on a whole bunch of heat sinks to create heat efficiency. But what I also have to keep in mind is that I need to have enough slots, like enough empty slots, and I need to have enough tonnage in order to add those heat sinks, right? So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to actually change the structure around from a standard structure, because I've only got 15 tons left and I still got to fit an engine in. The engine weighs, well, I'm not going to be using that little engine. If I use this little engine on this mech, my speed is going to be 37, or 35 rather. So that's really, really slow. So I actually like to use a really fast engine on my Hunchback. That's kind of why I like the Hunchback, because it can be very fast and also still take quite a bit of damage. So the fastest engine right now I can use is a 225. And this is sort of the equation when you're designing a mech. Is how much equipment, how much heat dissipation, how much firepower can you fit on and still maintain a reasonable speed, if you want to have speed. So the standard engine 225 puts me up to 72.9 kilometers per hour. And what that costs is basically all of my extra tonnage. So I'm not going to be able to put on any sort of heat dissipation with the standard engine 225, right? You know what? Actually, I think it is a good time to talk about engines. So I'll talk about engines. So the standard engine basically takes up less slots on your mech. Now, your mech is destroyed when your engine gets destroyed. So what happens with the standard engine is, because it takes up less slots and it's kept in the center torso, basically your center torso is the only way, well, essentially the only way that your mech can be destroyed. You can also take a headshot, or you can also have both your legs destroyed. But having your arms shot out, having your center torsos, or so having your side torsos shot out, these are all fine. All of these sections can be lost as long as your center torso is still intact. Now what happens is when an enemy shoots out your side, further shots to your side torso will actually hit your center torso because your side torso will be blown out. So that's kind of how your side torsos act as armor for your center torso, and your arms actually act as armor for your side and center torso as well if they're angled in the right position. So when deciding on an engine, you have the choices between a standard engine and an XL engine. Now, they're basically the same as, well, they are the same as far as speed goes, depending on their number rating. So a XL engine 225 is going to be the same as a standard engine 225. But the difference is where the standard engine takes up 6 slots and weighs 15 tons, the XL engine takes up 225, takes up, oh, there is no 225, but, or it is, here it is. The XL engine takes up 12 slots and uses up 10 tons. So less tonnage, you can save a lot of tonnage if you mount an XL engine, but you take up 12 more slots. Now that might not seem like a big deal, but it's actually worse than it seems. I actually never really use XL engines unless I don't intend to get shot at all. And I'll tell you why. So if you mount an XL engine, let me just mount an XL engine, you'll see what happens is it can't all fit into the center torso. All right, so what happens is that some of the engine goes into the left torso and the right torso. So what this means is that your left and right torso have now become vulnerable to once they're destroyed, your enemy can hit your engine, and basically all your enemy has to do is take out either side of your torso or your center torso, and any of these will make you vulnerable to having that engine destroyed. So once that engine is destroyed, you're destroyed. I think the terminology for creating a mech that, yeah, anyway, whatever. So what I actually found is when I was first trying to figure this out is that I would mount XL engines because they were much lighter. I had a lot more tonnage to work with. Like, look, I have 5 additional tons to work with right now. But what would happen is in combat, I was getting blown up left, right, and center because usually the left or right torsos go out before the center torso goes out. And yeah, I was just really, really vulnerable because this mech it's a medium mech. It doesn't have a lot of armor to begin with. It's got about half the armor as the 100-ton mechs. So yeah, in this mech with the XL engine, even though I was able to load out a much more efficient, much more heavy weapon platform, I was still really, really vulnerable to destruction of my engine. So I tend to avoid XL engines for that reason. Now, there may be some exceptions to that rule. Like, you may need an XL engine for whatever configuration you're trying to create, but if you want to create a survivable mech, like a really tough little mech, I recommend a standard engine. So I'm going to equip the standard engine 225 right now, and the issue that we're having is it takes me all the way up to 50 tons. And so what I'm going to actually do here is I'm going to upgrade my structure. So my structure upgrade can be either standard or endosteel. Endosteel weighs quite a bit less than the standard structure, but what it does is it takes up 14 additional slots. Now that's okay for me because I've got quite a few additional slots empty because I've only so far loaded on these 3 PPCs. So that's fine. That's a really good upgrade for this mech configuration that I'm creating right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the endosteel structure and swap out the standard structure, and as you can see, I've lost just about 3 tons. To get a little bit more, to take off a little bit more weight, I could even add ferrofibrous armor. And what ferrofibrous armor will also do is it increases the strength of the armor. So ferrofibrous armor only takes the weight down a little bit, about a ton on this mech, but it also increases the protection of the armor. So you've actually got 12% more protection with ferrofibrous armor than you do with standard armor. But as you can see, my tonnage went down a little bit more here. And now I'm actually able to, well, you know what, I don't have a lot of empty slots left. So that's kind of the issue. I've got some over here, and I've got a couple on my legs, but I don't have a lot of empty slots left. Now, what I might think about doing is loading on some standard heat sinks. But you can see but as you can see, I can only load on 3 before I run out of tonnage. So that actually only gives me a heat efficiency of 0.89. So basically, this mech is going to be overheating quite a lot. So I'm going to take off those standard heat sinks, and what I'm going to do with this mech here is I'm going to upgrade the heat sinks from standard to double, just the upgrade alone. Now here's how I think it works. Your engine automatically comes with a number of heat sinks. This one comes with 9. And actually, the one thing to note about different engines is, in some cases, certain engines will require a number of external heat sinks. So this one requires 1 external heat sink. So I have to load on at least 1 heat sink in order for this engine to run, but it comes with 9 built in. So as you can see, if I take this engine off, I have no heat efficiency. It all goes off. But when I load this engine back on, I think it's the equivalent of loading on 9 heat sinks, because there's 9 heat sinks. Where is it? Oh, this is a different one. This one actually has 10 heat sinks, and it doesn't require any externals. So, but what this one did is it put me at maximum tonnage already. So I'm actually just going to go back and continue on with what we were doing. I'm going to go back to the 225 engine. And what you'll notice is that, like I said, it's got 9 heat sinks, and my heat efficiency is 0.77. So if I go and I upgrade to double heat sinks now, my heat efficiency goes up to 1.09. Now I think what happened is, because I'm upgraded to a double heat sink structure, the heat sinks in my engine also doubled. I think that's how it works. I just know that when you switch to a double heat sink structure, your heat efficiency improves. And now the nice thing about double heat sink structure is that it doesn't actually take up any slots or anything like that. And what it does is it transforms single heat sinks into double heat sinks. And what you can do, and the nice thing about double heat sinks, is they are twice as efficient, but they weigh the exact same amount. The bad thing about double heat sinks is that they take up 3 slots instead of 1. So where I used to be able to mount single heat sinks on my legs, I can't mount a double heat sink there because it takes up 3 slots. However, pound for pound, heat efficiency for heat efficiency, the double heat sink structure gives me more heat efficiency than the single heat sink in this case anyway, because I needed to take down the tonnage on my mech, and I wanted to add a little bit of armor and stuff like that. So I don't have a lot of tons that I'm really left working with here. So what I can do is I can load on some double heat sinks, and basically, yeah, that takes this mech up to its basically completed stage, because I've got no more slots to work with. I've got really no more tons to work with, and the only thing that I wish, like this is pretty much configured. We've added on 3 PPCs, which actually do work. But what I don't like about this is that my top speed is now 72. Now, because I'm in a light, like a medium mech, I actually really want a much faster top speed. If I wanted the slow speed, I would personally use a faster. I would actually use a heavier mech. But because I'm using this light, nice medium mech, I actually want to get more speed out of it. So I can't really do that now, because I have on too many PPCs for this kind of setup. What I can do and I'll actually talk about this a little bit right now, is do a little bit of armor distribution. Now let's say that I wanted to keep this configuration, and I wanted to tweak my armor around. So basically, in the armor configuration, you can specify what sections of your mech are distributed, how much armor. So basically, your head gets some armor, your center torso, rear torso, right and left torso, legs and arms, they can all get some armor. Now, adding armor, look at my tonnage up here is 49.4. Now, if I add some armor onto my leg down here, you can see the tonnage go up. All right. So what I've actually done is I've taken my mech and I've lowered the leg armor down quite a lot. I could probably even lower it more, but I want to keep a little bit of armor on my leg. The reason for that is that I've never been destroyed in a mech fight by having my legs taken out. Nobody seems to ever shoot for the legs, so I can pretty safely get away with taking away a lot of armor off of my legs and still be pretty safe in combat. And this could go up another 28 points of armor. But 28 points of armor is, well, it's probably close to a ton. Probably takes up close to a ton. Not quite, but probably close to it. So I've gone and I've taken away a lot of my leg armor. The left and right arm, I don't have any weapons or any important systems really loaded in the left and right arm. So I can actually take the tonnage down on the arms quite a bit. The only thing the arms will do for me is they'll act as a bit of a shield for my left and right torso. That being said, I've rarely had my arms blown off either, so when I want to free up some tonnage, I just take my arms down a bit. Now, if you have your main weapons platforms in your left and right arms, obviously you'll want to protect your arms more. But if you don't, then you can get away with freeing up extra tonnage by taking armor off your arms pretty safely. My center torso is actually where I place most of my armor. I pretty much have my center torso maxed out, and I've left only 2 points for my rear. This is because I can protect my rear on my own, essentially. I can keep my rear out of combat. And I generally what happens is, I'll pop my head around a hill or up from behind a rock, and I'll take damage to the center torso. So I'd rather have more armor up on my front center than I would on my rear, and I rarely get destroyed by having my rear torso destroyed. So it's been my configuration has been running pretty well with minimal armor on the rear torso. Same sort of applies to the left and right. Now you can tweak those around a little bit if you want to. You can have a little bit more on the back if you want. I just haven't really found that I get destroyed from behind that much. So I've left the armor off. Now the thing that might be nice about having rear armor is if you plan to make escape, if you plan to run away as a part of your strategy. If, for example, you're a light mech and a lot of your strategy involves running away or doing circles and having the whole team shoot at you, then you might want to more evenly distribute your armor. But for my role and the way that I play, most of my hits come from the front, so I've geared up my armor to be strongest in the front. That being said, probably some other people have thought of this too, and it's very possible that one of the better ways to destroy a mech is to take out its legs, if other people have also tweaked down their leg armor like I have. This will depend whether or not they're kind of noob or not. If they're more advanced, they might take out a lot of their leg armor because they discovered, like everybody else discovered, that people don't really shoot from the legs. So I'm going to maybe explore that strategy a little bit, shoot for leg and see what kind of damage can be done. But for now, at least, nobody really shoots for the legs. So that's kind of a little bit about armor distribution. What I like to use this for is basically to free up little bits of tonnage if I want to launch, for example, if I want to include anti-missile system, AMS, and I need, another 0.1 tons, I might take a little bit away from my armor, and then I'd be able to load on an anti-missile system. So what I've got here is I need 0.2 tons, right, to load on the AMS ammo. So I'll just take away a tiny bit from the arms, and now I've got enough to load on some AMS ammo. Well, if I had the free slots to put it on anyways. I don't even know if I do have any free slots anywhere anymore. Yeah, I actually don't. So I would have to take off a double heatsink to put on some AMS ammo. But yeah, this mech is essentially configured to run 3 PPCs. Now, practically, 3 PPCs in combat is going to be overheating this mech a little bit too much. I know this from just playing, So what I would actually do is, instead of loading up 3 PPCs and having like that one single, maybe like 2 shots of burst damage before I overheat and have to really cool down, what I would actually do from a more practical sense of being able to sustain damage and not overheat is I would take off one of these PPCs and free up, look, I freed up 8 tons now. Take off the AMS, and what I would actually do now is I would take out this standard engine, and from this point I can see just how big of an engine I can fit in there now. I can actually fit in the biggest engine, the biggest standard engine, which puts me up to nearly 90 kilometers an hour. So I'm getting really zippy now. And the other thing is, by taking out that PPC and freeing up all that tonnage, is I've also freed up an additional 2 tons for whatever I might want to do with it. So what I could do is I could load a double heatsink into the engine slot. Some engines you can load additional heatsinks into. And this is putting my heat efficiency up really nice. 1.6 is going to be great. It's going to be probably a little bit more than I need, practically speaking. So what I would do here is I would probably go and I'd probably put my armor up a little bit more on the arms, and then I'd have a little bit more shielding on the arms. I don't know, maybe, yeah, I can actually just max out the armor on the arms, so that's pretty good. And that's kind of the basics of mech configuration. As you can see, I mean, loading up a mech oftentimes involves tweaking systems around to make everything work with everything else. So you kind of have to figure out the right balance for all the equipment that you want to have installed on your mech. You might experiment around with taking out structure or heat sinks or armor, and you can see how that might free up some additional slots for you. But at the same time, it would add up some tonnage. I don't need additional slots on this because I'm running PPCs, but let's say I wanted to run lighter weapons, since I didn't want to run PPCs anymore. I just wanted to run some medium lasers, load up some medium lasers, and suddenly I've got an additional 12 tons to work with. I might load up some lasers on the arms, and there's one on the head. So this has now got 6 lasers on it. The firepower rating confused me a little bit at first. Basically what this means is it takes all of your weapons damage. For example, the medium laser does 5 damage. And I've got, 6 medium lasers loaded on, so 5 times 6 is 30, and that's my firepower rating. Now, this firepower rating is kind of is your firepower rating for an alpha strike. If you were to fire all of your weapons at once, how much damage would you do all at once in that one shot? And that's your firepower rating. Now, practically speaking, because some weapons are faster and some weapons are slower to recycle, loading on, for example, I'm just going to take out these medium lasers, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to load in some small lasers. Now, small lasers do, like I say, 3 damage instead of 5. But they generate less heat, and they take up less tonnage. So basically, with a small laser, your firepower rating is only going to be 20 instead of 30, or it's 18, sorry, instead of 30. But your damage per second might be actually more over time, because you might not be able to sustain fire with medium lasers for very long before reheating, but you can sustain fire with small lasers for quite a bit longer. And also because they're lighter, you'll have additional opportunity to load on additional heat sinks. So I might actually take out the ferrofibros armor upgrade, replace it with standard, and that gives me quite a few empty slots to now start loading in double heat sinks. So as you can see already, my heat efficiency is pretty high. So I'm basically going to be able to fire all day long with these small pulse lasers, where I might have overheated with medium lasers after 3 or 4 volleys, 3 or 4, all weapon fire volleys. With all these small lasers, I'll be able to fire for a more sustained period and maybe do more overall DPS. I'm not too sure about the numbers there, but that's kind of the formula. So, yeah, tweaking around your mech for the type of playstyle you want to use, what kind of combat style you use. If you want to be up close and in somebody's face, small weapons might be better for you than medium or large weapons, certainly better than large weapons. But small weapons might be better for you than medium weapons because they'll generate less heat and you'll be able to put out more DPS. Where your enemy will be overheating, you'll still be able to keep firing because you've got the small weapons, they don't generate as much heat. You've got more heat sinks on because they don't weigh as much and all these sorts of things, right? Yeah, let's see. I'm not too sure if there's anything else I can sort of talk about today. I think I've kind of covered most things, most basics anyway. There's probably more to it, and I'm still learning a lot. But yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good start for this video. The Artemis, if you use long-range missiles, basically what it does is it increases accuracy, but as it is described here, each Artemis-enabled weapon takes up 1 more slot. So you get more guidance for less slots, and that's basically the whole equation in setting up your mech is tons, slots, heat efficiency, ammo availability. And you've got to take in all of these things into consideration to create like the maximum optimized setup for a mech. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this was helpful for you. Like I say, I'm still learning a lot about this game, and there's probably some stuff that I haven't covered, but I think this is certainly help newcomers to the game anyways, get the Mechlab figured out. And if you guys want to see more videos like this, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel. All right, have a good one.